Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morelville Church. Super glad to have you here with us this morning. We just want to say thanks for coming out and participating in church with us. As always, we encourage you to go and be the church. We're doing it online, but there are so many ways to still be the church out in the world. And so we just want to encourage you to find some of those ways to do that. And if you have any great ideas, let us know. We'd love to join in there with you. Just yesterday, we mentioned this before earlier in the week, Crucified Ministries led a group of people from Greater Things, a number of churches in the area, to distribute 500 boxes of food at Beulah United Methodist Church in Johnstown. And so just want to give so much thanks to all of those who participated in that. It was a wonderful event to be part of. So thank you for that. I do have just a few announcements, I guess. There's not a whole lot that I have, but we just want to make sure that you are aware that we do have resources for anybody who needs. As a church, we've been very intentional about making sure that we can be as generous as possible with the things that we have. So if you know of anybody, you can go onto our website. It is morelvillecob.com. A couple cool things have been happening out at Camp Harmony. We were able to record 2 campfires, virtual campfires, and so we are going to have them posted on our page and on our YouTube page. And I just want to encourage you all, if you know how to do this, it really helps us if you would follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That allows us to do more things on those devices. So just want to say, please do that if you know how to do that. If not, we'll help you out with that. As always, we try to be a very generous church, and we also believe that giving is part of our faith. And so there are a number of ways that you can give to the Morelville Church. You can mail something in to 408 Chandler Ave. You can go on our website, morelvillecob.com. There's a link to donate. You just set up an account. And also you can do that through texting at 84321, and you can donate that way. So I think that's all of the announcements for today. We got those out of the way. If you do have things that you want us to communicate with the outside world, feel free to comment below on here. It always is just a cool thing to see those comments. And let me know we can get those out to the rest of the world. So we have started a new series. We are done with our core values, and we've started a new series called Parables. And we're going to be looking at potentially 6 parables that Jesus told. And so I'm excited about that. We're going to kind of dive in this week. And parables are really kind of important. We are a society, a culture that has grown up with stories. They're really big for us. Maybe you remember hearing about the tortoise and the hare, or the 3 little pigs. They were stories that kind of had a meaning for you. And at a young age, while it was difficult to understand deep things such as morals, there were stories that helped guide you through those things. They taught the things that are intangible and untouchable. Stories are very, very powerful, and they allow us to compare things that we know with things that we don't know, or strange things, or maybe things that are unknown up until that point. They allow us to connect emotionally. I am always more persuaded by a story than just a spreadsheet. I'd like to think that I'm logical and that a spreadsheet of just hard data would, sway my opinion, but I also take into consideration the story behind it. And advertisers, they know this. And so for as long as people have been trying to get other people to buy or do stuff, advertisers have been using story to get across their message. And some of my all-time favorite commercials, these I think are my all-time favorite commercials. They come from a company called AmeriQuest. And I'll be honest, I don't even know if AmeriQuest is still around as a company. Maybe they were bought out. Who knows? They could be around. And if so, hey, AmeriQuest. But these are some of my favorite commercials. And I'm only going to show you 2 of them because I don't have the time to do the rest. But I want to encourage you to go after this, to go and look up AmeriQuest's commercials. So I'm going to show you 2 of those, and then we'll get right back into the sermon.
Patient has a fractured fibula. Given a mild sedative, so he can be able to go on tomorrow.
Daddy's gonna be so excited.
All good.
That killed him.
Paging Dr. Palmer, Dr. Barbara Palmer. Dial 452.
Look at the cute dog.
Stories, even short ones, can share a lot of information. It's why Jesus used them a lot. Jesus was an amazing storyteller, and that's one of the coolest things. If you look through the book of Matthew and in other of the Gospels, but Matthew especially loves the fact that Jesus tells stories. And so we're going to be hanging out in that particular book a decent amount over the next couple weeks, but it was such a great way for Jesus to convey very deep, very powerful understandings and truths. And he used stories from things that the people would understand. That was a wonderful thing about Jesus, is he used what he saw and what the people knew to tell a story about something that was deep and powerful, like the truths of the heavenly kingdom. In Matthew 13, we're going to look at the very first parable that Jesus told in that book, and it's about a farmer, and he's going to be sowing in his field. So I'm going to read that for us, parts of Matthew 13, starting in verse 1. It says this: A farmer went out to sow his seeds. As he was scattering the seeds, some fell among the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seeds fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times that what was sown. And then he says, whoever has ears, let them hear. Now, if you've ever asked somebody a question or you're having a conversation with them and they just start to tell a random story, it might get confusing and you might not quite understand what their point of it is. I think of Rose Nyland from the Golden Girls. Anytime she tells a story about St. Olaf, she just goes through these crazy, crazy events, and then all of the other girls are just kind of sitting around going, what in the world is Rose talking about? I kind of feel like that's what the disciples were looking at here when Jesus was talking, because they said, why are you telling these stories? What's the point of all of this? And for one of the few times in the Bible, Jesus actually tells the deeper meaning flat out to the disciples. And so that's kind of why we're starting with this particular one, because he explains it for everybody to understand. And so we're going to pick that up in verse 18. And he says this, "But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed that was sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown." This parable is one that calls us to examine our hearts. God makes it pretty clear that the sower is Jesus. The soils are the world, that's us. The different types of soils are the different types of people. That the seed is Jesus' gospel message of love, of truth, of sin and salvation. And so he's sowing this out. Now, one of the cool things that I always liked about this is that he sows on all the soil. In our modern culture, we probably don't want to hear that because it doesn't make sense to us. Why would I sow seed on soil that I don't think is going to listen? We have modern agricultural understandings and we do soil analysis and we decide that this crop gets planted this year but not that year because we want the best results, and we don't waste any of those resources. But God takes a look at that and he says, this gospel, this truth, this salvation is good for everybody. And so he spreads that across the entire world. So God gives us grace, and it's up for us to receive it. There is grace that has been sown. It's up for us to receive it. These soils are our response to the gospel. So we're going to look at those each very quickly. The first one is the path. The seed gets sown on the path. And the path is necessarily hard packed. When they were sowing back then, when they were doing their farms, there were often wide paths in between because people walked everywhere. They didn't have all the mechanical advantages that we currently have, and so there were wide paths in between all of the crops so that way people could get to it. And these were by necessity hard packed in because you didn't want a soft path to walk on. Your feet would get stuck. And so they would pack these things down, and the dirt would get very, very tight and often dry and hard. I think that's an apt description of many people in our world. People who are cynics. Cynicism is a big issue today. We've seen too much. We don't believe or trust any of the news sources. We don't believe or trust any of the government sources. We don't believe or trust what our neighbor says. We don't believe or trust anything that comes onto social media. We're cynics. It used to be that if you wanted to have some information out there, you would have to get published, and that meant you'd have to go to somebody who knew what they were talking about. And things needed to be vetted before they would go out for mass consumption, but that's not the world we live in, and so we're cynical of almost everything. We've been hardened by the things that have happened in our lives, and maybe some of those things are traumas that have happened to us. Maybe there's some of the hopes and dreams that we thought we would be able to get, but it just didn't happen. And so we harden ourselves in response to what the world is doing around us. There are people who are hardened because they're rebellious. There's no way they're going to give up any amount of control. They're not going to let anybody in to take any of that away from them. The gospel calls for us to give up control of quite a lot of things. We give our entire heart, mind, soul, body, strength, all of those go to the will of God. And there are people who cannot handle that. And so their soil is hard. And when God shares that gospel, when the gospel is shared with them, it doesn't penetrate the soil. It just sits on the top and the birds can come and eat it. The second type of soil is that shallow, rocky soil. And this was the type of soil that was most dominant in the area for the people who were hearing this for the first time. Jesus was out on a boat preaching, and this was a story that he was telling to the people. And they could look around and see shallow, rocky soil, and they knew what happened when you sowed seed into shallow, rocky soil. It would go and it would grow very quickly, but when it touched that rock beneath that shallow layer, there was no place for the roots to grow. There was no moisture in a rock, and so when the sun comes out, they dry up and they die. There's a lot of that going on in our church, in the world around us. And I don't necessarily mean our church, I mean the church in the world going on. We have a lot of Christians out there who are great to come on a Sunday morning. They love the cultural aspect of being part of a church. They love a lot of the things that happen in a church. There's comfort in attending church services. And that's great for an hour a week, and they get charged up, and then they go home and there's nothing else there. They hear what somebody like me, a pastor, has to say, and then they maybe ingest some of that for a little bit. But if we're honest, we forget most of the things that someone like me says by the time we have lunch. And so that's all that they get. There's a lot of passion, there's a lot of vigor, and everything's great. But when something hard comes, they have no roots. And they can't understand why bad things happen. They don't have the theological understanding or backing to know why things are happening the way they are. It's important for us as Christians to know more than just what some guy says on a Sunday morning. This faith is not mine that I give to you. This faith is something that you have and that you grow in. It's important for us to remove some rocks in our lives. We have faith, and by necessity, faith finds its value in the history that God has proven himself in. So the third one is the thorns or the weeds. And this is great soil. In this soil, everything grows. And in the Western culture, this is kind of where we are. Everything is growing. There's a lot of prosperity to be found in the soil that gets choked out by weeds. Because everything can grow. And there's so much competition. I think we live in a world where there's a lot of competition for faith. Now, some people will say, oh, okay, sports, they're taking over, and so we can't have church now because of sports, or we can't have church now because of, other distractions that are going on. I want to encourage you to understand this. It's not their fault. We're not doing the right things to make the gospel powerful enough to remove those weeds. The reason why this happens is because we're lazy in our lives and we don't remove the thorns. We don't remove the weeds. And so they come in and they choke faith out. They choke passion out. And we allow those things to become a bigger part of us than they have a right to be. And those are some of the good things. But sometimes there's sin. And those things need to be just kicked right out. We have to remove those things in our lives. Jesus looks at these weeds and he describes them as the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things. We have to ask ourselves, what are the weeds in our lives? That's a challenge for us. And there's the good soil. That's the last bit of soil that we get to talk about. And it is good. There's a lot of great soil out there. And a lot of you are planted in good soil. Jesus said that the difference between the good soil and the others is that they hear the word, they understand or they accept it, and they produce a crop. There's an understanding that when we hear the gospel, there's an imperative to produce a crop. And so that's how we know if we're in good soil. If we've heard God's salvation story and his commands to love one another, if we truly accept that, if we understand where that is and we grow in that understanding daily, we understand that God's will is the ultimate in our lives. If we've begun to produce fruit, and we've talked all about the fruit of the Spirit here in this family, it's important. If we are starting to do those things, then we know that we are in good soil. I want to make sure that we understand as we close here that there is no work that you can do to earn salvation. You can't do anything to earn salvation that Jesus has not already done for us. It's a gift that's freely given. It's the gift that the sower is out there spreading those seeds around. But there is work that you can do to cultivate your soil. There is work that you can do to better receive this message. And so my encouragement for us this week is to look at our own lives, to have a good, honest look at your life, an evaluation of your soil. Have you been trampled on and hardened by the world around you? Have you become cynical? Have you allowed rocks to rise up and make your faith shallow? One of the things that a farmer will tell you about rocks is that you are always picking them out of the soil. Every time you till, there's more rocks that come out. And so are you doing the work to remove those rocks? Have you let the weeds of the world grow up around you? Those are things that we need to concentrate on. And the cool thing about all of this, one of the best parts about all of this is encouragement for us, is that all of these soils are about attitudes. And attitudes can change. You can change your soil. You can break up the soil on those paths with a rototiller. You can break that up and make it soft and pliable again. You can remove rocks from a field. And you can tend to a garden and pull out weeds. My encouragement for us is that you would do the work to become good soil. Amen? Awesome. Well, I just want to say thanks for joining us this week. It's been great to see all the responses. And so I just want to encourage you to do that, to go out and to be the church this week. We love you all, and I hope to see you on Wednesday. By the way, if you stuck around this long, every Wednesday we're doing a giveaway. It's a game that you get to play with us. And as of right now, Wednesday's game prize has not been claimed. So you could get a $25 Sheets gift card. So check out last Wednesday's post, do what it says, and then check us out every Wednesday for midweek at Morelville. And you could win a $25 gift card from Sheets. So I think that's it. Thank you guys for joining us. Love you. And we'll see you around.